Nanda Devi Unsoeld was waiting inside a tent at Camp 4 of this Himalaya peak. It was morning and a snow blizzard had just hit the Camp 4, making it unsafe to stay. Consequently, everyone decides to retreat. However, Nanda Devi was sick, suffering from diarrhea and nausea. She had developed a hernia in her groin, which could be fatal, but remaining at Camp 4 posed a significant risk. Observing Devi's illness, everybody feared her death, but she remained calm and composed, as if she had accepted her fate. They were unsure if Devi could descend from the steep and dangerous north buttress of Nanda Devi. There is something special about the mountain Nanda Devi. It has attracted great adventurers and mountaineers to its shrine. With an altitude of 7,816 meters, located in the Garhwal Himalaya, Nanda Devi holds the esteemed status of being the greatest goddess to the local people. Since 1830, many explorers have fallen in love with this magnificent beauty. For over 100 years, many have attempted to approach this mountain but have met with the failure. While humans had come close to conquering the summit of Mount Everest, gaining access to the inner sanctum of Nanda Devi was impossible. Even today, only the privileged few can step foot in her realm. Nanda Devi is protected by the giant peak of Khumbu and the Garhwal Himalaya. Changabang and Kalanka lie to the north of the Nanda Devi, Sunanda Devi to the east, Nanda Khat and Nanda Kot to the south, and Nanda Ghanti and Trishul to the west. All of these peaks stands at height of either 7,000 meter or 6,000 meter, and the lowest point between them is approximately 5,910 meter. This network of complexity makes penetrating the inner sanctum of Nanda Devi a formidable challenge. Locals believe Nanda Devi was a girl. She was running away from a crazy Afghan prince who was in love with her and wanted to marry her. Nanda Devi ran as far as she could and transformed herself into a mountain to protect herself. Now she is guarded by the giant peaks surrounding her, obstructing any intrusion by human being. In 1905, there was a serious attempt to penetrate into the inner sanctum of Nanda Devi Sanctuary. The great explorer and mountaineer Tom Longstaff fell in love with the beauty of Nanda Devi. He approached the Nanda Devi from east and managed to reach a col named after him, Longstaff Col. However, he couldn't descend to the inner basin, which he described as too dangerous and had to turn back. One approach that seemed practical was from Rishiganga River. Rishiganga River originates from the inner basin of Nanda Devi Sanctuary with four major glaciers: Rishi Glacier, Northern Nanda Devi Glacier, Changabang Glacier, and the South Nanda Devi Glacier, contributing to the highly turbulent river Rishiganga. As it approaches the outer basin, Trishul and Dunagiri Glacier feed water into the Rishiganga, making any attempt to cross the river too dangerous. As Rishiganga escapes the narrow canyon of Nanda Devi Sanctuary, it meets Dhauliganga at the first human settlement outside the sanctuary. The Rishiganga gorge is narrow and deep, with surrounding rock rising almost 3,000 meters above the river. It is a series of buttresses that stop any passage into the inner basin. Traversing through the canyon requires crossing the dangerous flow of Rishiganga multiple times and navigating through the overhanging rock faces. Many expedition teams attempted to enter the sanctuary through the Rishi Gorge but failed until 1934, when a team led by Bill Tillman and Eric Shipton made a bold attempt to penetrate into the inner sanctuary. Following the trail set up by the previous team, they established a camp before a formidable buttress face where many had retreated. Confronted with a gigantic wall that seemed impossible to bypass, they managed to find a passage beyond the buttress and named it Pisgah, marking the final challenge before discovering a clear path to the sanctuary. They were the first human to set foot inside the sanctuary. Upon entering the inner basin, they were greeted by the flower carpet meadows and gorgeous snow-covered peaks, revealing a pristine wilderness. It was likely the first time animals like musk deer, Himalayan brown bear, and snow leopard had ever encountered Homo sapiens. However, they couldn't attempt the summit as the monsoon rain had begun in the region. In 1936, Bill Tillman returned to Nanda Devi with Noel Odell. Odell had previously been part of Everest Expedition in 1924, during which George Mallory and Andrew Irvine mysteriously vanished in the mountain. The Nanda Devi expedition team consists of 8 members, all highly accomplished and experienced mountaineers. They hired Sherpas and porters to carry 400 kg of supplies through the narrow Rishi Gorge. They traversed through the treacherous canyon to reach inner sanctum of the Nanda Devi sanctuary. Base camp was established at the moraine of South Nanda Devi Glacier. They acclimatized well, and on August 11, the team began ascending from the southwest ridge route of Nanda Devi. Sherpas and Porter accompanied the climbing team until Camp 2 at an altitude of 6,100 meters. By August 20th, all climbers had reached Camp 3 at an altitude of 6,500 meters. Before they could make further progress, they were hit by the storm that delayed the progress, and few members fell ill. As a result, only 2 members were able to progress further to Camp 4 at an altitude of 7,200 meters and ultimately reached the summit of Nanda Devi on 29 August 1936. Eric Shipton was at the time focused on Mount Everest, regretted not joining the Nanda Devi expedition. Thus, the epic story of Nanda Devi expedition brought mountaineers and explorers in her serene beauty. Some climbers triumphed while others demised or vanished, adding to the mystique of her allure. Among them was the legendary alpinist William Unsoeld, known for his daring ascent of the difficult West Ridge route of Everest in 1963. When he was studying in India, he visited Garhwal Himalaya. He was so mesmerized by the beauty of Nanda Devi, he named his daughter after this mountain, Nanda Devi Unsoeld. Growing up as the daughter of renowned mountaineer, Devi received exposure to the outdoor and adventure from the early age. She began hiking and climbing with her father, exploring the Himalaya and immersing herself into the local culture and languages. In 1974, while in Nepal, Devi discussed her plan for Nanda Devi expedition with Adam Carter. Adam Carter was a friend with William Unsoeld and a member of the team that made the first ascent of Nanda Devi in 1936. Devi and her team came across a new photograph of Nanda Devi's north face in 1976, which inspired them to attempt the summit via a new challenging route. The expedition was sponsored by the American Alpine Club and the Indian Mountaineering Foundation. It included 11 American and 2 Indian climbers. The group was diverse: men, women, Indian, and American, chasing a common goal, north face of Nanda Devi. The expedition was led by highly experienced mountaineers including John Ross Kelly, who had recently summited Dholagiri, and later he became a renowned mountaineer. He was joined by the Louis Ricard, another veteran from Dholagiri expedition. Ricard was a neuroscientist and became a renowned mountaineer, known for being the first American to summit both Everest and K2. Another member from Dholagiri expedition who joined the team was Peter Lev, an experienced alpinist. John States, an experienced mountaineer and a doctor, who had served as the expedition doctor in many Everest expeditions. Among the female climber was Marty Hoy, a young but experienced climber. Tragically, she later died on Mount Everest in 1982 while attempting to become the first American woman to summit Everest. The team was solid. They started from the Lata village in Garhwal. They hired 90 porters to carry gears and supplies to the base camp. It was a difficult trek through the narrow canyon of Rishiganga River. Many fell ill during the trek, with Marty Hoy suffering from food poisoning. Eventually, she became unable to drink or speak well. She was walking lifelessly. The group was divided over whether Marty should be sent back. When her condition worsened and she feared her death, she was rescued and evacuated by the Indian Air Force helicopter. During the trek, Devi also developed a hernia in her groin. This occurred when tissues fell out through a weak spot in abdominal muscle, potentially blocking the blood flow to internal organs, which could be fatal. Despite this, Devi showed no concern about her condition. She actively participated in campsite activities, offering help and interacting with porters in Nepali language. On July 22, they reached the inner sanctum of Nanda Devi. As mesmerized as they were by the beauty of the sanctuary, they were concerned about the steep and difficult north face of Nanda Devi. By this point, they understood that climbing in alpine style was not feasible. For the safety of all climbers, John Ross Kelly planned expedition-style climb. The expedition members were divided into 2 groups. Team A, led by John Ross Kelly, Louis Ricard, and John States, were leaders leading and fixing the ropes. The remaining members who would follow them were in Team B. The next morning, the team started climbing up through the difficult gully to reach the ridge camp, carrying the most necessary food and gears. From there, they traversed below the hanging glacier to reach the advanced base camp at an altitude of 5,400 meters. While at advanced base camp, an avalanche trigger from the high northwest face crashed past advanced base camp. It destroyed few tents and swept away supplies. On the next day, two members Adam Carter and Elliot Fisher quit the expedition and returned back home. But the rest of the team continued the climb from Camp 1 to Camp 2 and finally at Camp 3, which was set up on the ridge. The route from the Camp 3 to Camp 4 was the steep north buttress of Nanda Devi, perhaps the most challenging and dangerous part of the expedition. To proceed further, porters were trained in basic mountaineering technique by Indian member of the team. This training enabled them to assist the team by carrying the load further up in the mountain. Once again, John Ross Kelly led the climb and successfully fixed the rope till Camp 4 at an altitude of 7,300 meters. As the rest of the team began their ascent to Camp 4, Devi's illness became apparent. She was suffering from stomach problem, experiencing diarrhea and nausea frequently. Some member of the team felt that it was too dangerous for her to continue climbing further, especially through the steep buttress on the way to Camp 4. Despite her situation, Devi insisted on continuing her ascent to Camp 4, progressing very slowly through the most technical section of the climb. Willie watches her struggle. He may have wanted her to stop, but he knew she wouldn't listen to him. Somehow she managed to reach the Camp 4, which was not far from the summit, and took a rest for a few days in the tent. While she was ill, Devi wouldn't sit idle. She would move around the campsite, help others, and she would always have that charming smile on her face. Meanwhile, the rest of the team worked on establishing their route to the summit. On 3rd September 1976, John Ross Kelly, Jim States, and Louis Ricard successfully reached the summit of Nanda Devi. But upon their return, they found Devi was extremely ill. She was coughing frequently, her diarrhea worsened, she was weak. Considering her condition, Devi made the decision to quit her summit plan and return to Camp 3. In the morning, as they prepared for the descent, Devi's face appeared bloated and blue, indicating she was in terrible shape. Descending to Camp 3 required navigating through the dangerous buttress. To compound their misery, a storm had just hit Camp 4. Soon, everybody, including the climbing party, decided to descend. Everything was packed and they were waiting for the storm to break. Devi was sitting beside the fellow climber inside the tent. Then she spoke with great calm, "I am going to die," and collapsed. Immediately she fell unconscious. Team member rushed to administer CPR, but her lips grew cold, signaling her demise. Soon, everybody was in tears. It really changed the atmosphere and their plan. Willie Unsoeld was in grief, but decided to commit her body to the snows of the mountain, for which she had come to feel such a deep attachment. Her body was laid to the rest in the icy tomb on bliss-giving goddess Nanda Devi. For Porter, Devi Unsoeld was a divine entity, something out of goddess Nanda Devi herself. With brooding sadness on his face, Willie Unsoeld descended to base camp with his team. In an ocean of sorrow, he carried the burden of his daughter's death and returned to his home. The only relief he found was in Devi's memory in the mountain, remembering how cheerful his daughter was even in adversity. The fact that she died doing what she loved, recalling her joyfulness in the mountain, eased his pain. 3 years later, Willie Unsoeld met his own demise in an avalanche while climbing Mount Rainier in US.